Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So today we're going to wrap up our topic for the month of April, which is narcissism and narcissistic personalities. Throughout this month, we've talked about characteristics of narcissists, the thought patterns of narcissists, the cycles of narcissists, and narcissistic abuse. Whew, that was a mouthful. But I wanted to talk today, wrap things up with the question, or asking the question, now that I know, what do I do? And I think that's very important for any part of our self-discovery journey, healing journey. Anytime that we find out information about ourselves or others, it's like, now that I have this information, what do I do with it? So I'm going to share some of my personal experiences, and I'm going to also tell you some techniques, strategies that may help you to learn to accept and also protect yourself. And that is all in the idea of self-care as well. And so I wanted to start by saying that I am definitely not an expert in anything that we are discussing. I'm just merely sharing the experiences that I've encountered throughout life. But one thing is debatable, I think, and you can talk to experts in the field. And there is the debate of whether narcissists can change their ways, whether they can change their behaviors, whether they can change their thinking. From my experience, I do not feel that they can change. I just don't think it's a possibility. And the reason that I feel that way is because the first step to changing something is acknowledging the problem or acknowledging what is needed to change. The thing about narcissists is that they don't think they need to change at all. They think they're the best thing, almost perfect. So they don't see any reason to change. And that's the key. If you want to change, you have to see a reason, and they don't see a reason to change. Now, one thing that I had, this is really difficult and it's very painful. But one thing that you need to know and to be aware of at first is that you don't need them to be aware to understand. You don't need for them to know that they're a narcissist, to know they're a narcissist. You don't need their acknowledgement at all. You just need your self-awareness. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. And that's important, because if you don't go in with that awareness and that knowledge, then they're going to convince you otherwise. And even though you do have that knowledge and awareness, they're going to try and convince you otherwise. That's part of the pattern that I had discussed before, where there's parts and points where you begin to question reality, and you begin to question what you remember, and you begin to question yourself. And I know at times I thought, well, maybe I'm just too judgmental. Maybe I'm just too hard on them. Maybe I'm just too not so understanding. But the fact was that I was all those things, but the person I was dealing with was a narcissist. And I had to come to terms with that. And you also need to be aware that it's not you you need to recognize that it's not you, it's their character. No matter how hard you try, things are not going to change. It's just going to repeat that cycle, because that's part of who they are. That's their character. And they don't see anything wrong with it. I spent so many years thinking, oh, if I do this, if I do that, if I change this, if I change that, if I change my behavior, if I change things that I do, then the situation will change. But it never did. I spent years every night praying that this situation would change. And it never did. And for a long time, I started, because it was so painful and because it hurt so badly, I began to blame myself because that was just easier. It was easier to blame myself than to see this person for who they really were or who they really are. And that was the wrong thing to do as well. That ended up sabotaging me and hurting, and it ended up hurting me. It lowered my self-confidence. It lowered my self-worth. Yada, yada, yada. But that was what I did, because to avoid the pain of seeing that person for who they were. And this is your own personal decision. This is your own personal journey. And you get to decide what you want to do. But I'm just telling you that that's the mistake that I made, was to, instead of see the person for who they were, to just avoid it and then blame myself. And I don't think that was the best decision. I know that wasn't the best decision to do. But once you get to be aware of who the narcissist is, what those characteristics are, be it your spouse or your significant other, a family member, friend, someone you work with, once you become aware, then what do? The first thing to do is what I like to term radical acceptance. Anyone who knows me knows that I like to do things very drastically. I feel deeply. I take action in powerful ways. I do things to the extreme sometimes. And that's just who I am. And I feel like that's what you have to do in order to get through the pain. You have to have radical acceptance. And that means that you acknowledge that the narcissist isn't going to change. You acknowledge that they can't change because they can't see themselves as needing to change. And you also have to acknowledge that the cycle of disappointment, the cycle of frustration, the cycle of pain is not going to stop. That cycle is going to continue. You just have to decide whether you're going to get caught up in that cycle or not. So you need to have this acceptance of this person. And just remember, it's not a reflection of you. It's not you didn't do something. It's not that you could have done more to prevent this. it's part of their nature. It's who they are. Don't blame yourself. It's just the person. And the sooner that you accept that, the sooner you'll be able to move out of that. Now, it's very important not just to, within this radical acceptance, it's very important to grieve the relationship, to grieve what you thought you had, to grieve what you thought you would have. And again, that can be anything. That could be a romantic relationship, a familial relationship, friendship, whatever. Maybe that person isn't the spouse that you thought they were going to be. You need to mourn that. Maybe that person isn't the parent or the other family members that you thought they could be. Maybe you don't have the family that you wanted, or the family that you thought you could have, or you thought you should have. You need to mourn that. Maybe that's not the friend that you thought they were. Maybe that friendship isn't what you expected it to be. You need to mourn that loss. It's very important that we both accept and we grieve this relationship. And so, as we're doing that, and as we're continuing to grow, you're going to become more aware, and you're going to be able to spot these things. Once you start the acceptance, you'll be able to spot these things. You'll also be able to see where are the little traps that you fall into. And a lot of times you'll be able to see yourself stepping into the trap. The choice you have is whether you're going to fall into that trap or not. That's the choice you have. And it's all a choice, because you have to, when you come to the acceptance part, you have to determine whether you want to continue to have a relationship with this person in some form or fashion or not. Sometimes complete cutoff of all contact can happen, and sometimes it can't. Sometimes you can just cut that person out of your life and you can say, okay, I'm done, move on. Sometimes you can't. If that person is a family member, you may not be able to. If you've had children with this person, you may not be able to just cut them out like that. So I'm going to tell you a few things that I've done from my experience, and I've found it very helpful to not cut contact, but to keep the narcissist at a safe distance. And once I've done these things, I can't tell you the freedom I felt. I can't tell you the relief I felt, the mental clarity I felt. Every time I think about it, it just blows my mind. So, to start off, the first thing you need to do is you need to establish boundaries. We talked back in January and February about boundaries and establishing boundaries and the importance of boundaries. And I just want to tell you that boundaries are so important. They're not closing doors. That's not what a boundary is. It's not closing a door. I think of a boundary more as opening a gate. You have a gate to protect yourself, and you can open that gate to people that are going to bring joy to your life, to people that are going to build you up, to people that are going to add to your life. And you can close the gate when there's people that are not going to do those things, when people are not going to build you up, but they're going to bring you down, when people are not going to add to your life, but they're going to suck the life out of you. I'm not saying close the gate completely. That's your choice, but you can close it however much you want to. So that's what I think of a boundary. I think of it as a gate, not a closed door. And it's very important that we remember that the boundaries, they limit the behavior. And that's what we want to do. We want to limit the harmful behavior. We want to limit the harmful behavior that takes away our sanity. We want to limit the harmful behavior that affects our mental being. We want to limit the behavior that takes away our health and takes away the life that we have and that we deserve. And so each boundary is a choice, but each boundary will limit that behavior. Now, once you do that, you have to follow through with the consequences. If the boundary's crossed, these are the consequences, and you have to do it. Otherwise, what's the point of a boundary, right? I have contact with my abuser, but I limit that contact. I limit the amount that we talk. I limit the amount that we interact, and that's okay. It's okay because I'm okay. It's okay. I'm learning that it's okay to take care of myself. And so those simple things, once it gets to the limit that I've set, that nobody else knows about, but I've set it, once it gets close to that limit, then I say, okay, I'm done. Once it gets close to the limit of any interaction with the narcissist in my life, I say, I have a hard stop, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore, but I'm glad you're okay. And that's just what you have to do. Because if you don't follow those consequences, if you don't follow through with the consequences, then the behavior will continue. And that's the thing. If I'm aware enough to know and sense that when I need to step away, when I need to exit the conversation, when I need to exit physical space with this person, if I'm there, I'm aware enough to be able to do that. And that's taken a long, long time. That's taken years of work to be able to bring myself to that awareness. But whenever I feel like a boundary is about to be crossed, I remove myself. And that's been the best practice that I have tried so far, is just removing yourself. If the boundaries start to get crossed, absolutely disengage immediately. Because if you stay in that and get caught up in that cycle, the narcissist will drag you in, and before you know it, you've fallen through and you've gone back into that cycle. It's hard and it's painful. And every time that I do that, I have to remember the fact that this relationship is not what I thought it would be. This is not where I thought or what I thought it was, but it's what I've got. And I'm reminded of that every time. The second thing that I would suggest that's really, really helped me is if there becomes a conflict, which there will, because that's what narcissists like. They like the chaos. They like the chaos or the argument. They like to use that to play victim. They like to use that for manipulation, or they just like the chaos. And if I see or hear the least bit of conflict, I disengaged immediately. And I'll say things like, if we're in conversation, all of a sudden, if I see that narcissism raise its head, I'll say, I'm not sure. I don't really know. I don't really have an opinion, or I don't understand, or I don't know what you're talking about, or I'm sorry, I just don't know. Something like that to kind of bring things down from an argument or a chaotic conflict where there's somehow I'm going to be blamed in the wrong way. And if you have a narcissist in your life, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to be blamed in some way for the conflict that they created. And so if I hear anything, like, it can be a simple statement. And if I share my opinion with that statement and they come back with something, well, no, you don't understand it, it's this way. You don't understand. Why are you treating me this way? Why are you, I immediately just disengage. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you were talking about, or I don't have an opinion on that. I guess that's why I don't have an opinion on that. You know, it just makes things easier. And it makes it, then when you cut off and you don't argue back, but instead you say, I don't know, then the person can't use that to manipulate you or other people in their delusional world. And one thing that I can tell you is, do not, under any circumstances, when a conflict arises with a narcissist, do not justify, do not argue, do not defend, or do not explain. And the reason being because the narcissist will pick up on something in the next few sentences that you are saying, and they will just turn it around. There goes that cycle again, and now you're caught in it, and now you're the villain, and now this is all your fault. They're a victim. And there's nothing you can do at that point. And this takes practice. You know, I have bitten my tongue so hard until I tasted blood so many times. And you just have to get to that that place where you can do those kind of things if you do choose to have the narcissist remain in your life in some form or fashion. Sometimes I'll just, when the person starts talking, I'll just zone out somewhat. I'll just start thinking of like big fluffy clouds or ocean waves or things like that. And I'll just focus on maybe places I've been. I'll focus on other people that bring me joy. Those kinds of things, just help. They just help with the disengaging from the conflict. Another idea is to just totally detach emotionally. If this person is going to be in your life and you can't cut contact with them, just detach emotionally, because you do not need empathy or validation from them. You don't need it. So you don't need to seek it either. And that's important to remember, because a lot of times when we're in a relationship with a narcissist, we want that empathy for ourselves sometimes. We're never going to get empathy for anything. They're just not capable of it. And we seek that validation because we're looking for what reality really is. And if I'm living in my reality and my reality is true, then maybe I'm not such a terrible person as what you think that I am in your delusional world. And it's really important for us to understand that we don't need to seek validation or empathy of narcissists, because I spent years trying. I spent years trying to get my emotions validated, trying to get some sort of empathy with what I was enduring, what I was experiencing, and it just wasn't there. And to this day, it's not there, and it's never going to be there. Another thing to do is that you need to recognize their limitations. You need to realize that, you know what, this is more about them and their character than it is me. You need to stop personalizing their insults or their demoralizing or demeaning ways of talking to you. You need to stop making it so personal. And I know that's hard. Trust me, I know how hard that is. But the minute you understand that this is who they are, this is not who I am, the minute you do that, you have such freedom in your mind. You have such freedom and clarity mentally. It's amazing. Also, create a mental distance from this person. All of these things are just going to help you be able to deal with this person a little better, right? For the amount of time that you need to, or that you want to. You at the same time, this is going to protect yourself, because this is going to continue to reinforce the awareness that you've gotten, the knowledge that you've gotten. What are you doing with that knowledge? You're holding on to that knowledge and you're using it. You're using it to realize and recognize their limitations. You're using it to realize and recognize the cycles and the cycles of abuse that come from the narcissist. And you're using that knowledge to stop taking their insults personally, and to realize that they're, what they say about you is not who you are. It's totally different. You're just taking that step away, using that knowledge that you've acquired. And another thing that I've tried to do with the narcissist in my life is to become uninteresting. You know, when we talk, when we're around each other, I'm very polite, but I offer minimal responses. You know, how are you? I'm fine. Anything going on? Not too much. You know, simple. Just a few sentences. And that way, you know, there's no that way they don't get the emotional reaction that they're wanting. Because they're seeking chaos. They're seeking that chaos. They're seeking that argument. That's what they're wanting. And they're going to pick at you any way they can. They're going to find every button that you have. Push, 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 push on each of those buttons. But you can't react. You can't react. Because when you stop giving them that emotional reaction that they're seeking, when you stop giving them that argument that they're seeking, or the chaos that they want to build, they'll go elsewhere. They'll seek attention elsewhere, and they'll leave you alone. I know that from experience. And they will. And everyone's a lot happier. You know, you may also have to grieve at this point, too, that the person that relationship is with doesn't know you any more than a stranger does. You'll have to grieve that, too. And you'll have to acknowledge that. Again, that's painful. That's very painful. But it's necessary. It's necessary to protect yourself. Anytime that a narcissist can't get the attention they want, or the reaction that they want from you, they will go somewhere else. And they'll be just as satisfied. They'll always come back, and they'll always pick, push, push, push at you. But they'll leave you alone for a little bit. Time that's necessary for you to regroup and get things back clear in your mind. I was talking to the narcissist in my life, and we were having a discussion, just a general discussion, and finally they just looked at me and they said, "You know, I can't make you feel guilty over anything, can I?" And I looked back at them and I said, "You know, why would you?" I said, "No, you can't, but why would you want to?" And that's the thing. I can't make you feel guilty. No, you can't. But why would you want to? And those are the kinds of things and those are the kind of responses and that we need to have those kind of discussions. And once I said that, then the discussion stopped and we moved on. The discussion stopped and we were on to the next thing. But if I had not said that, then I'm sure 100% certain that there would have been a chaotic argument of some sort. And somehow I would have been to blame. So I think it's very important to remember those things as well. And the final thing that I would like to talk about is that when you're dealing with a narcissist, you must focus on your self-care. And what that means is that whatever you do to make yourself feel better, to regulate yourself, you need to have a plan to do that either before or after going to see the narcissist, before or after going to talk to the narcissist, before or after whatever interaction you have with them, before or after or both. You know, whatever you need for the time. Sometimes it looks different. It's not always the same thing. Sometimes mine is going outside somewhere and just breathing in the air, looking at the sky and the beauty that's around. Sometimes it's calling a friend. Sometimes it's a phone call to just say hi, to remind myself that I am cared for. Sometimes it's just to listen to something funny, to read something funny, to just make me laugh. Maybe there's part of a TV show or part of a movie or part of a podcast or something that really makes me laugh, or really just, I think is just super funny. And I'll just listen to that. I'll just watch that. So, you know, it's whatever that thing is that feeds you. Maybe it's going for a massage. Maybe it's going to get your hair done. Maybe it's going to buy something nice for yourself. Maybe it's eating a good meal, whatever it is. Or maybe it's reading a text from someone. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's something just to remind yourself, just to ground yourself and to tell yourself that, you know what, I am cared for by someone. And I don't think people realize how important that is for people to know. And what a powerful self-care tool that is. And so I hope that in this episode, I hope I've helped you in this episode. I hope that somehow I have offered something that will be of benefit to you. I hope that maybe I've brought awareness or knowledge of some sort. Maybe I've told you something or said something that just makes you feel seen. Yeah, that I understand what you're saying. That happens to me too. Or maybe I've just been a comfort somehow. Because none of us want to go through life alone. Nobody wants to go through a struggle alone. So maybe I've been able to tell you or to share with you that, hey, you're not alone in this. You're not alone. So I want to thank you so much for listening today. And I want to tell you that whatever the struggle, whatever you're going through, you do not have to suffer alone. Thank you.